Of all the North Carolinians I ever knew, Needham B. Broughton was one of the three who towered head and shoulders above the throng, and in some respects, he was the greatest man I ever knew. Superintendent E.P. Moses.
Does anybody remember Miss Penny? She earned $70 a month in 1945 and spent her summers taking more university courses. Such dedication. Carol Gift, class of 1945.
For several years, we saved our nickels and dimes to purchase a movie projector for the auditorium. I also recall seeing Tale of Two Cities. It's strange how you can remember worthless details and forget the important ones. John Woodruff, class of 1939.
Senior Skip Day 85, Shelley Lake, 300 plus seniors and 2 weeks of after-school detention for the whole class. Now that's a memory. Keith Hill, class of 1985.
Hula Hoop, the rage of young and old. Caught Raleigh's fancy a few weeks ago. Can you master it? High Times, 1958.
Of course, the teachers can't be forgotten. Mrs. Fonville and her little ballet dance, Mrs. Peacock's graceful movements in the podunk gymnastics show, and Mr. Holliday's long set shots. Lattapack in 1957.
I feel like high school is probably the most important 5 years of my life, as far as developing me, because I entered as a 13-year-old boy and I graduated as an 18-year-old man.
I hadn't been the best student up until the point that I came to Broughton. In fact, I had kind of been in trouble and had been sent to Ravenscroft, Raleigh Academy, Martin. I had skipped schools. And Broughton was my last hope. My mother said if I didn't get my act together, I'd be going to military school. I came to Broughton. I got involved in student council, played soccer, was homecoming queen, on the court my junior and senior year. So you can imagine what it's like for me to think back to those years, because that was really a turning point for me in my life.
I would define high school as a great learning and growing experience. Not only learning inside the classroom, but learning a lot about myself.
And that's where you meet like a new family, your friends and your teachers, if you get close to any, and you just have this wonderful experience. So high school is one of the best experiences a person can have.
What is high school? 4 years of sitting in classrooms, marching across a stage to receive a diploma, infamous cafeteria lunches, marching band, prom, homecoming? For 75 years, Needham Broughton High School has shown thousands of young minds just what high school is. Standing like some ancient castle, watching quietly over downtown Raleigh, Broughton has a rich tradition of academic excellence rooted in the early days of 20th century Raleigh. The Civil War left Raleigh with only one school, held in the old Governor's Palace, where Memorial Auditorium now stands. Public education was not favorable among taxpayers at the time. It was September of 1905 that Raleigh opened doors to its first official high school, run by Mr. Hugh Morson, an expert at Latin. In 1909, the school moved to a location on Morgan Street. The building was designed to meet Raleigh's needs for the future. It could accommodate 300 students. But as it has for the last century, Raleigh was growing fast. The newly formed Raleigh City School Committee realized there was a need for an expanded high school. In 1924, Raleigh purchased a 10-acre site at the corner of Peace and St. Mary Streets from Annie Graham Smallwood for just under $17,000. A competition gave Raleigh a designer for the project, William Henry Dietrich, trained at Columbia University and Wake Forest College.
W.H. Dietrich was a Virginia-born architect who set up shop in Raleigh in 1927 and became, before his retirement in 1960, he became the premier Raleigh architect of the 20th century. you can't look at a building and say that's Dietrich, because he did it all. He won a design competition, and it was such a grand monument that immediately he became the architect in town. It's the type of high school that says, in this town, we think a high school is a really special institution and deserves the grandest architectural style and deserves us spending a lot of money to create a landmark.
Also known for his striking Dorton Arena and the Raleigh Little Theater, his design implemented a Romanesque style featuring a 95-foot bell tower and plenty of copper and stone. The school would be as impressive as any other in the nation. Stone for the building's striking appearance came from a quarry at the current location of Glenwood Village. The new high school, also known as West Raleigh High, was almost ready by the fall of 1929. But it wasn't until the end of that first year that the school took a name. Needham Bryant Broughton was born near Garner on February 14, 1848, the fifth of 7 children. Despite his father's death at a young age, Broughton quickly learned the printer's trade. After schooling in New York, he returned to Raleigh in 1869, where he went into the printing business with Mr. C.B. Edwards.
Needham Broughton was a citizen of Raleigh who was very much interested in education. He had Edwards and Broughton Printing Company, and he was very supportive of public education.
A religious man, he founded the Baptist Tabernacle and developed a Sunday school run under his leadership. He grew into a model citizen, serving as a senator for 1 term. By 1870, he had become part of the Raleigh School Board and fought diligently for a public high school that Raleigh deserved. He died in 1914 in Philadelphia and was buried at the historic Oakwood Cemetery in Raleigh. It was a letter from Broughton's partner, C.B. Edwards, that suggested his name for Raleigh's new high school.
I do not think there is a man in Raleigh who helped more young people and did more for the upbuilding of our city and its public institutions according to his means.
The school's first months were trying. The front gates opened for the first time on September the 3rd, 1929, though no official classes were held that day. The cafeteria, then located in the basement, flooded. There were no desks, no books, no clock in the bell tower. Olive Worth was part of the first teaching faculty, and despite the problems, she remembers how exciting the school's opening was.
It was great. We had a course of study that included doing things a new way, and it was a great group of people.
Paul S. Daniel was the first principal of Broughton High School. He left just a year after opening to become superintendent.
He was tall and handsome and very courteous to everybody. He had 1 child. Her name was Mary Scott Daniel, and he absolutely adored her.
While routines were being put into place, construction pounded away as the building raced to completion. Broughton's first football team kicked its first pigskin on October the 4th that year. 12 clubs organized during the first school year, including a science club, a library club, girl reserves, and the High Y, which was run in cooperation with the local YMCA. Just like today, the student council held an important position in the school. The first senior class graduated just over 100 people, though caps and gowns weren't used until 1936. The school's Lattapack yearbook was first published in the spring of 1930. 4 years later, after several informal tries, the school's student newspaper became a reality, with the first issue of the High Times. 36 was also the year that Broughton won first place in all major sports, and a year later Broughton expanded to a 9-month school term, earning its accreditation. The structure was completed that year and featured 29 classrooms and a library with 5,000 volumes, gymnasium, and an auditorium seating 1,500 people. The school was expanding. Traditions were already being put into place. The first radio broadcast from the school occurred in 1939. Students would often broadcast football games or special events on WPTF or WRAL radio. Also that year, the first official North Carolina history class in the state was taught by Miss Runyon. In the fall of 1940, the Honor Society was recognized as a national chapter. Just like its student body, the building was growing, adding wings and moving the cafeteria to its own building.
It's so much bigger than it used to be.
The Holiday Gym opened its doors in 1959 after 2 years of construction. The building was named after longtime faculty member and principal Joe Holliday.
Oh, the Holiday, or as it was called then, the new gym or the boys' gym, was tremendously important to us. It was important from the standpoint of physical education, it was important from the standpoint of athletics, and it was from the standpoint of it being an assembly hall for our student body.
I do remember when Holiday Gym opened. It was an exciting time, very exciting time. We needed it so badly.
The facility was state-of-the-art, even featuring a treatment room with whirlpool baths. Originally, athletic events took place in the field right beside the original gym. Later, games were held at Devereaux Meadow and on the campus of NC State. Finally, in 1989, the school's massive football stadium lit up for the first time at a cost of $178,000. Only one major disaster has directly affected the school. On the afternoon of February the 20th, 1969, at 2:05, a fire started in the lounge underneath the auditorium. It ravaged the structure and the basement below it, giving students and teachers quite a scare.
They had just renovated the auditorium, and I had 2 children here at the time, and I marched my class out at the proper place, and then I looked up and saw the smoke, and I thought, I have 2 children here, but nobody was hurt.
Chaos, pure chaos. As a matter of fact, one special ed teacher left her roll book in the basement and went back to retrieve it.
So we just thought it was a fire drill, and we all got out, and then knew that we were counting students, and knew that everybody was out, and they were sort of sad days for a while there, with classrooms all jostled up and things like that.
It was said that the fire was started by a cigarette.
School commenced the following day. Broughton was labeled a historic site in 1990. A year later, a secondary courtyard was enclosed with a wing dedicated to science. It was named after longtime principal Richard Jewell.
My goal was to make it have the best atmosphere that we could have for learning and try to use the abilities of everybody. Department heads ran that department just about. The student body, officers, class officers and so forth had their leadership roles. And just to get everybody involved, the parents were very strong, as they are today.
By the end of the 20th century, Broughton's campus was in bad need of repair. Leaky ceilings, peeling paint, broken windows, all were agents that led to Broughton's $30 million renovation, which started in 2002.
Oh, this school, as beautiful as it was on the outside, anybody that came through this building knew it was falling apart on the inside. And it just seemed such a shame. And, they just hadn't had the money through the years to keep it up.
The renovation repaired problems and gave Broughton new dance studios, offices, a renovated television studio, and the crown to the school, a completely remodeled auditorium. Decade after decade, Broughton reflected the world around it. the school made its way through the Great Depression, World War II, the turbulent 60s, the Vietnam era. Students were sitting in classrooms and watched as the World Trade Centers crumbled on September the 11th, 2001.
My uncle, I found out, I haven't heard from him yet, and I know he lives up real close to the World Trade Center, and I'm not really sure quite yet if he's going to be okay.
Many of us sat in this very school and witnessed the planes crash into our symbols of strength. We stood in horror as we watched people jump to their deaths. We leaned on each other for comfort, in spite of the fear in the voices of our friends and families, and the fear in our own hearts.
We are a direct reflection of what is going on in the country today.
Go Clinton! Bush! Clinton! Bush! Clinton! Admiral!
Well, we went from, I think we still had a few manual typewriters here when I came here. Then we went to all electric typewriters. And then, of course, computers were just coming in. Audio-visual was becoming more complicated, more useful.
Hi, I'm Mary Cameron Van Grafflin.
And I'm Brent Summers. And welcome to WCAP's first edition of Capitol News, Broughton's new news and announcements television show.
This school is now, wired for technology. And when I came to Broughton, we had in the office a couple of typewriters that had a lot of memory. It was just so lacking in technology. We had a wonderful committee led by some parents, of course, who raised a lot of money to provide the equipment that we needed.
The first problem Broughton had to face was the Great Depression.
The thing that happened with the Depression was the fact that there just wasn't enough money to do the things we needed to do. So the teachers had to do many, many things. I think I was paid $81.50 a month. And then the next year, $87.50.
We were just on the throes of the Depression, for one thing, and everybody got affected by that. And I think that made it special in that the class was not, there was no class separation, and we never felt that. I can remember a couple of football games. One of the boys that went in the service, for example, I go back to my 8th grade, went in the service after 3 football games. He was Bobby Crocker, whose brother was a good friend of mine and played football later on. Bobby was a very popular young man, and night of the Wilson game, his family all went to the game. They decided he better not play because at halftime they had to go over and get on the train, which was directly across from Devereaux Meadow, across downtown Boulevard. And I can remember vividly him getting up, the whole Crocker family, and everybody yelling and saying, "Go get him, Bobby," and cheering for him, and he waving, and they all go out single file. And he gets on the train, the lights of the train leave, and in 9 months he was killed.
We lost a lot of our classmates in the war.
819 caps enlisted in World War II. 37 of them made the ultimate sacrifice. Apple trees were planted on the front lawn in their memory.
In the summer of 2001, when we had a chance to go to Europe, we made a stop at the Luxembourg Cemetery in Luxembourg City, where over 5,000 Americans are buried from World War II. General George Patton is also buried there, and every student in the band was given a North Carolina and a United States flag, of which they left on the grave of a North Carolina serviceman. Also, we laid a wreath on a grave of a pilot who was a Broughton alumni who was killed in the Battle of the Bulge.
I remember vividly two veterans that came back that were decorated veterans that came back and spoke to us, and they had been wounded and they were back, and they came to chapel and spoke to us.
I was here when integration came, and it was pretty smooth. It was not hard because the students were really great that came here.
Of course, there was changes that had to be made. There were recognitions that had to be developed, and that was done. There was some preparation in advance, but I think that everybody cooperated, and it went very well.
A lot of people worked to help make it smooth. A lot of teachers, a lot of parents, and a lot of students. both the black students and the white students. But it was a difficult time. There were fusses, fights, disagreements. These things went on for 2 or 3 years. And they were the things that we just had to work with. We had a lot of parents from the black community that really came over and helped us so much with our program. And of course, those first years we had dual presidents, dual officers, dual everything.
Lots of fights, lots of hair pulling. And I didn't blame the kids because the almost all black school was coming over here. The teachers had been pulled out. What they called the best teachers were pulled out and brought into what they called the white schools at that time. And it was a terrible time of upheaval.
The faculty was sort of the grounding force for all students. We had faculty-student games where Frosty Murdoch and Muriel Allison dragged out their old 50s costume and danced in front of the student body. So if the student body could see that the faculty wasn't divided and that other than being in our classrooms as teachers, that we were also co-workers and friends, made it much easier.
Between 1955 and 1962, Broughton was the only high school in Raleigh for white students. It wasn't until 1971 that the school became fully integrated. A school isn't complete without a talented group of teachers to educate youth. Broughton's teachers, some known for their kindness, some infamous for their school marmish ways, have touched the lives of all who have entered into the school.
I just know that for many years, the standards that so many of them set, they expected you to reach for that bar and meet that standard. And they were never happy unless you got to that level that they expected you to exceed at.
Mr. Link Page was one of the teachers who made such a big impression on me.
Hi, I'm Mr. Page from the Social Studies Department.
I think because I had him for 5 classes, and I spent a lot of time with him in these classes, and I got to know how he taught, and he taught humanities.
I had a 9th grade English teacher, Miss Knowles, who later was a Miss White, Mrs. White. She related, for one thing. She was a good teacher. She related. She seemed to care, and she was and I needed a lot of care.
Was it Ms. Cogdell, the geometry teacher?
Yeah.
Oh, she was like,
Too, wasn't she?
she could have been a linebacker on a professional football team. She was tough, and she was good at teacher though. I respected her as a teacher, but I feared her.
The teacher that I really liked was Ms. Wooten. She taught English.
There's one that we always remember was Mrs. Wooten. She's Mrs. Fleming Nash. She was a great teacher. She always wore the most beautiful high heels you've ever seen. But she would, I guess, frighten them. And Miss McDermott was really hard too. She was a chemistry teacher and quite hard, but had quite a reputation.
When I was chairman of the department, I used to have to go around to observe some of the teachers. And I think Win Cherry was probably the best teacher I've ever seen.
In my many years of being here at Broughton, you always hear great tales about many fabulous teachers, Herr Watts being one.
Before teachers were allowed to wear slacks, there were 3 of us. Zalota Miller, Nell Katie, and I decided one Friday to wear a slack suit, knowing that Dr. Jewell would frown on it. Herr Watts, every time I walked in, and I walked in with a dress, he referred to me as Madame Colbert. When I came in with a slack suit, it was, hey you.
And I know one time during a school year, Herr Watts kept track of every time the PA system came on during the day. And at the end of the year, it was like 1,000 times, just to let people know how many times that you're disturbed in your classes. Marion Timothy was another great teacher that the seniors just loved to have her for senior English.
She just had the best sense of humor of anybody that I've ever worked with. You could sit with her at a meeting and I'd be cracking up the whole time I'm sitting next to her. Marjorie Person, she was just so knowledgeable about everything that We did history, English, African American history.
Miss Person, she was my ELP teacher. She was a great teacher, not just in regards to teaching the lesson plan, but molding character and getting you prepared for life after high school.
Now, the funny thing about the Glee Club, so we went to Greensboro, and can't think of the lady's name that was, Miss Kenyon, that's who it was. She asked me if I'd like to go, you know, and sing in the choir. Oh, yes. So we got up there, and we were practicing, and she said, you know, Blanche, would you come down here and sort of help me, because I couldn't sing. I can't carry a tune. So anyway, I sat down with her while the Glee Club sang.
Dixie Porter, Paula Long, Goldie Coates, Carol Mazaris. All these women were on the third floor, and we met in we had this little break room where we would sit and chat, and they were just wonderful support for me.
Mr. Murdoch was my anatomy and physiology teacher. Taught me an awful lot.
Frosty is still getting letters from students who went on to medicine and some kind of anatomical thing after they'd taken his class.
Miss Roberts was great. She was one of our class advisors. Roy B. Teal, he was our VP. Miss Nutt, too, she was my, gosh, it was a horrible class. Advanced Algebra Trig with computer programming. In order to go to Broughton, I had to take computer classes so I wouldn't have to go to Athens, and whew, rocked my world a little bit.
Jackie Nutt, the minute the bell rang, you started class. You had your pencil, your book was open, and you went to it. And she was very hard-nosed, but the kids loved her to death.
Helen Runyon was a history teacher. Ellen taught the social studies.
Well, you know, probably some of my favorites were characters like Miss Runyon. And she was a great teacher, but she also had a wonderful sense of humor and was a little bit naive, and we loved to tease her, so she was kind of fun.
Mrs. Glenn did English, too. How she did it, I do not know. Her husband was a veteran who had suffered problems with the war, and many nights she was up all night.
I can remember Mr. Hazuri, who was a science teacher. He's actually gone on to other things. He now owns Mitch's Tavern on Hillsborough Street. He's been the proprietor there for years.
Mary Penny was so wonderful with teaching the basics. She had those rules, and everybody had to memorize them, and I still have them. And every now and then go back and look at her rules. They all had to memorize them, and they were wonderful rules, punctuation rules.
Miss Penny, you know, you had to do that right. You had to know your Gilmartin, you had to know words, you had to know your English. She was really strict.
She was both kindly but severe in her criticisms of one's writing and everything. But the thing about her, you felt she had a passion for the subject she was teaching.
Miss Peacock, everybody knows Miss Peacock up on the second floor. And
she was driven for excellence, but she was a joyful person too. She had a very happy marriage, and she was loved teaching like I did, and she was a good person to have as head mistress of the English department.
She was magical. She would, when she was teaching Shakespeare, she'd get up on the table in front of the class and she would act it out. And the kids loved her.
The funniest story that I can remember about Phyllis Peacock is being angry with her senior English class for some reason or another. And in the older part of the building, we had closets that would lock, and then we had the classroom door. Well, Phyllis decided that she was so upset with the students that she was going to leave. She pulled herself up marched straight into the closet, slammed the door. Not a peep was heard, I understand, from students. No one giggled, no one said a word. She composed herself and in all her royal majesty opened the closet door and continued with her Shakespeare lesson.
I think if you were in Miss Peacock's advanced class and you were a professional author who, like Reynolds Price or Ann Tyler, you got along just fine, but if you were just a regular old high school student, even though you made good grades, it was really hard. I didn't like it. I spent most of the time trying to hide behind the person in front of me.
We have a Broughton Faculty Alumni Association, and we give a scholarship to some Broughton student who desires to be a teacher.
Teenage life is always on the pulse of American culture. Through the decades, Broughton's halls have been filled with young adults going through their teenage years, and the Raleigh teenager has changed quite a bit since 1929.
That was the age where everything was just fun, you know. We'd get a group together and go out to Mill Burney. That was a pond out there.
Well, if there was nothing here at the school, as I recall, most of the time, that's what we did. We either went to some activity, usually an activity. It didn't mean we didn't have boy-girl relationship.
Hanging out with the guys on Friday nights, going out with the girls on Saturday nights, things like that, you know.
You know, it was a time when you dated a lot of people. There was not this going steady. It was a different time altogether. It was innocent.
I remember going to all the games. I mean, it didn't matter where you were playing, if it was, you know, here or if it was out of town. We always packed a car and went.
We felt that we had a tremendous support from our student body for all of the activities, including athletics. And we were playing in Rocky Mount for the Eastern 4A Championship and the right to go to the state championship. And one of the most remarkable things that I remember about student support was we had 24 bus loads of students that we took to Rocky Mount to watch their team play for the Eastern Championship.
A lot of times our hangouts were athletic events. If there was a football field, that was a hangout. There was a basketball goal, that's where we were.
Going back to just be very candid, there was not that much drinking going on, and nobody had any drug problem. And it was not that much. If you were drinking, you were probably ostracized, frankly.
You know, and then too, you know, if you smoked and the boys were found smoking in the bathrooms, they had a choice. They could either go home and tell their parents, or they could go down in the engine, where's the room where the furnace was, the furnace room, and get a paddling. So many of them chose to do that.
And we'd go down to Fayetteville Street, which Fayetteville Street was still a street, and everybody knew everybody down there. And in the afternoons when we were out of school, we probably went swimming or played tennis or something to that effect.
And then we had some things downtown at Moore Auditorium. Things went on down there. Or you had a movie. You had 3 movies downtown and then suburban movies.
On Saturday night, there was really, I mean, going to the movie was about it. But it was fun, and the Ambassador Theater downtown and the State Theater.
We'd go to movies, and we would go to the drive-in afterwards to Roy's or whatever.
You didn't have many cars. You just had a few teachers out here, you know, and so there was not a lot of movements going around. Later on in the 80s, we had more cars.
I was really big into the music scene. I liked to go to concerts. And we didn't have Alltel Pavilion at this time, or Charlotte, so Greensboro was the place to go see concerts. So we rented a bus and saw the Police.
Back then, there were no discos to go to.
We had dances here.
Yeah, a lot of school dances.
And that was fun, wasn't it? And I had no problem with them. I got out and danced with them.
And we had a dance every year, the High White Dance, which was a big affair, like the Queen of Hearts and the other dances we had. We had our own band.
Gaddis's drugstore after school, that was probably one of our favorite places to be. Mr. Gaddis was our homeroom teacher after school.
I was not a big one to hang out at the corner drugstore. I never thought that was all that exciting.
The Milky Way across the street from school was what place we went after school.
That was where you could get your last cigarette before you went to class.
There was a store across the street there on St. Mary's Street, and we did not want the students over there.
Hats is a little store which we were not really allowed to go across the street, you know, little snacks and Cokes and things like that. And of course we'd sneak over once in a while. And another thing, this is personal. There were 2 or 3 girlfriends and I snuck off. We had a car and we went over to a little snack shop way off of Hillsborough Street. We were having a great time and in walked the coach, Ray Gregson. Well, he didn't say anything. He just looked at us, and then he said, "You girls not supposed to be over here." But he didn't turn us in.
You could get by with anything if you knew how.
Broughton began a tradition that is still in place today with its annual fair, originally called the Carnival. The first event took place on February the 28th, 1930.
Georgia Kirkpatrick was very much admired and loved by the students. She decided the time had come for them to have some special social life. So we had a little box out there, and they could put in $1 and vote, and at the end of a given period, everything was counted and the money was counted, and we elected a queen, princess, and had a big party. And the one who had gotten the most votes was the queen for that particular party.
The event was at first a money-making device for the school. In 1940, the carnival morphed into the annual Queen of Hearts Gala.
Well, the Queen of Hearts, when I was in school, penny a vote. So it was a penny a vote, and whoever got the most votes, in other words, whoever put up the most money, it could be boyfriends or friends, or it could have been parents sending money. That was what was suspicion sometimes. But it was supposed to be for a pretty girl.
The camaraderie and the teamwork to put it on, you know, you have no budget. You have no budget. So decorating it's so much fun, and that anxiety building up to it.
It was one of the events that I'd say really brought everyone together.
It's just a huge affair, and it's something we look forward to really all year, and everybody dresses up probably in their fanciest gowns and their best outfits for anything else we do. It's just the special formal thing at Broughton.
You just feel the magic in the air. And then the night of the dance, everybody's dressed up so beautifully and elegant, and then you just get to see everybody's creative side in the fashion.
There's nowhere else in the world that you have what you have at our Queen of Hearts.
For a lot of people, that's one of the first dances, so there's a little bit of nervousness.
I was scared of a trip.
And I remember I was privileged enough to be an escort for the court, and there are all kinds of parties and breakfasts and dinners and things that go on before and after.
Queen of Hearts, through the years, I think has kind of been described as the poor girl's debutante ball.
Beautiful girls, beautiful decorations, and entertainment gave students the chance to work together to create a breathtaking event. 1955's Queen of Hearts, Faye Arnold, went on to become the first runner-up in the Miss America pageant. Finding the perfect dress is always a big dilemma for the girls on the Queen's Court.
Oh gosh. We went to Fuquay, and that's where I got my dress. And then, but we had also been to Clayton, and we've been all over Raleigh, so it took us probably a week.
It's hot pink, well, actually kind of rose color off the shoulder, and poofy sleeves with beadwork down the front and on the sleeves. And it's peach, and it's puffy sleeves, and it's straight, and it comes to a square above the chest.
Picking an escort isn't easy either, as these girls from the early 1990s explain.
My escort is Ray Debnam. Courtney Collins.
Why'd you pick him?
Cause he's taller than me, and That's what I really wanted, somebody that was taller than me. I don't know. I just did.
Ben Woodruff.
And why'd you pick him?
We've been really good friends for a long time, and I don't know, I just like to be with him. He's really nice.
Well, he's in my SAT verbal prep class, and he's very nice, and I couldn't think of anybody else.
Okay.
No, I mean that in a good way.
Okay.
He's a great friend of mine, I just want to add.
These are the sort of things schools need to give them a sort of identity and coalescence of I find. So I always thought it was a wonderful occasion.
I had a lot of pressure from students to carry downtown and other places, and I said, look, it's your program, this is your school, you can go to the gymnasium and do anything you want there and decorate it any way you want, and you can plan it. Let's keep it here. So we always did.
In 2004, organizers invited former Queens back to Broughton to be part of the festivities. Broughton has hosted many famous faces in its halls over the years. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke in the auditorium on February the 10th, 1958. Years later, in the Holiday Gym, rock star John Bon Jovi warned students about the dangers of drugs.
John Bon Jovi does the Broughton Caps.
American Idol superstar Clay Aiken was actually a mascot for the senior class in 1984. Colin Powell spoke with students shortly after the Persian Gulf War. Broughton has even been in a music video. The Connells shot their video for their modest hit 74-75 on campus.
Fight, purple, fight, gold, cowboy cats, be strong and bold. Get your cats, be alive, 74, 75.
Governor James Hunt was inaugurated on the front lawn on a cold January morning. North Carolina's son, James Tater, played at the event. Al Gore spoke with a group of students during his campaign.
Well, John Edwards I have a special connection with John Edwards because I taught both of his children. I taught Wade and I taught Kate, his older children, and that's very special to me now, to see Kate doing what she's doing. And I couldn't wait to see her at the convention. And to have been a part of their life when Wade died has been something that's been special to me through the years too.
John Edwards he and his wife founded the Wade Edwards Learning Center. And when they did, I was just so impressed with the fact that they would do that, because computers were just taking a strong hold, and students, many of them didn't have computers at home, and I thought it was the best thing that anybody could do for the students at Broughton as well as the people in Wake County.
But Broughton has given birth to many of its own notable alumni over the years as well. Pistol Pete Maravich is probably the most famous athlete to graduate from Broughton. A whiz on the court, Pistol Pete scored more points in college than any other player in history. He died suddenly at the age of 40 in 1987. In 1991, Hollywood told the story of Pistol Pete on the big screen with the film The Pistol, Birth of a Legend. English classes gave birth to numerous notable writers. Broughton grad Ann Tyler became a literary master with books like The Accidental Tourist. Reynolds Price started off his career with an award-winning book, A Long and Happy Life. Both writers credit Mrs. Peacock with their love of words.
They give her credit to this day. I know both of them well, and we've talked about Phyllis with each other about that. So they still give her credit for a lot of things that she gave them.
Sharon Lawrence, class of 1979, found a career on screen starring as Sylvia Costas on the hit TV show NYPD Blue for 7 years. She's also appeared in numerous television movies and TV series, such as Ladies' Man.
You could tell early on that she had a lot of talent, and we just felt like, I think all of us in our class felt like one day she'd end up being right where she is in Hollywood.
Kid Brewer was a legendary party man around Raleigh in the 1980s, hosting James Brown and Tina Turner at his home overlooking Crabtree Valley. He appeared in the James Cameron film, The Abyss. Brewer ended his own life in 1989.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Dollar. Due to testing,
Aubrey Dollar, class of '98, landed a role in the soap opera Guiding Light in 2002. She's also appeared in several television shows like Dawson's Creek. Shavlik Randolph wowed America with his talent on the basketball court. He led Broughton to a 23-6 record in the 4A sectional championship in 2001. Many have drawn parallels between Randolph and Broughton grad Pistol Pete. Throughout the decades, many things have happened in the halls of Broughton High School. Students have learned the Pythagorean theorem, Shakespeare's lines have been memorized, hands have been slapped, hearts have fallen in love, while others have fallen out of it. Tears have been shed and picture-perfect smiles have beamed.
I still really feel a great sense of pride and joy at having spent 22 years here.
I loved every kid I taught.
Broughton was part of the life of all the people who worked here and went to school here.
Broughton to me has been not only high school, but a wonderful experience. And 10 years from now, I think I'm going to look back and I'm just going to wonder how and reflect on how fast it went. Just as I was starting to get comfortable, it was time to graduate.
You know, I don't go shopping any time that I don't see a student.
Broughton has brought joy to my life, personally and professionally. During my 13 years here, I have seen so many good things happen, and I've been a part of so many wonderful things that have happened at this school.
I've learned a lot at Broughton. The students really do care, and teachers at the school do care about each other.
I love this age group. I can't really imagine a day without the high school kids in Broughton, and that'll be a hard thing for me to handle.
It was not so much that it changed my life, it just gave me the good fundamentals.
It was just, 22 years of my life that is written very indelible in me and will always be there.
Well, if you look at any successful school, I think there are 3 or 4 things that are present, have to be. Number one, you have to be a portion of a good school system. You have to be in a supportive community, which we were. You have to have parents who send their youngsters, the boys and girls, to school with a purpose for being there. You have to have a terrific staff, which we had. And we put it all together, and then with the leadership that we can afford or could afford, we think we had a very successful school here at Needham Broughton High School. We were very proud of it.
I know I learned more than my students learned in those years. And I never think of Broughton without great love. It's far more important to me than my own high school in Salisbury, North Carolina. When I think of high school, I think of Broughton.
I think what is so special to me about being at Broughton for so many years is the tradition that's here. I know when my cousins went to school here, I didn't know a lot about this place. Then I took a job here and I learned a lot about what Broughton is to the community and how the community is always supportive of anything that happens at Broughton. And I guess our jobs as educators and as students is to keep that tradition going, both academically, athletically, musically, and anything we do in the school.
Well, it gave me an opportunity to help with the lives of many of the wonderful people in Raleigh today. Broughton, from its very beginning, was a good school, and it is still a good school today.
It has a reputation, and I think it'll always be a great school.
In an issue of the High Times, graduate Peggy Baker put into words what Broughton would say if it could speak.
I am a building, alone brick and steel. I am classrooms bounded by walls and blackboards, yellow, beige, and green. I am a library, shelf upon shelf, and book after book. I am an auditorium, campaigns, assemblies, and the World Series on television. I am a gymnasium, footballs and tennis rackets and dirty towels. I am a cafeteria, tables and chairs, and hungry people to be fed. I am teachers, understanding, encouragement, and correction.
New faces come, old faces go. Trophies are added, traditions change. What is change? Realization? Awakening? Awareness? Change is personified in me. I am change. I am a realization, an awakening, an awareness. I was built, stone upon stone, and change after change. I will grow, stone upon stone, and change after change. I am the future, for the future is of youth, and I am youth.
Some will never see me again. Others will. Their children will come to me, and I will guide them and mold them. I will grow, stone by stone, and change by change. But my meaning will never change. I will be to them what I was to their parents, Broughton, cradle of their future.